Everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, I'm going to be your guide and maybe channel a bit of your favorite, overly enthusiastic history teacher as we take a massive 500-year field trip through economic history. We are going to decode the invisible forces that shape our incredibly globalized world, tracking exactly how trade theories have evolved from the days of wooden sailing ships hoarding treasure right up to our modern era of digital data and sustainable development.
You know, international trade is honestly like a massive, constantly shifting puzzle. Why do nations actually bother to exchange goods in the first place? And how in the world did we get to this point where the smartphone in your pocket has components that cross 10 different international borders before reaching your hands? That vertical disintegration of production didn't happen overnight. To understand how we operate today, we've got to uncover the past.
So here's our lesson plan for today. We'll be covering mercantilism and gold, the efficiency revolution, resources, innovation, and scale, modern competitiveness, and wrapping up with digital and sustainable trade.
All right, let's jump right into part one, mercantilism and gold.
We're going to follow this progression as a historical timeline. We're starting way back in the 16th century, a time when a nation's wealth was quite literally just the physical gold and silver locked securely in a vault. This was the era of mercantilism, basically the world's very first systematic theory of international trade.
To really get inside the mercantilist mindset, listen to what Thomas Munn wrote way back in 1630. He said that the rule is to sell more to strangers yearly than we consume of theirs in value. It perfectly captures their belief system. Governments actively intervened with heavy tariffs because they genuinely believed that accumulating precious metals was the only way to win. If you imported, you lost gold. If you exported, you gained gold. Simple as that.
But then Adam Smith comes along and completely shatters that whole idea. The contrast here is huge. Smith destroyed the mercantilist myth that trade is just a zero-sum game with a clear winner and a loser. Instead, he argued that dividing labor and specializing actually benefits everyone involved. It's a total paradigm shift. Which brings us to Section 2, the efficiency revolution. In 1776, Smith introduced absolute advantage. Think about it like two students studying together. Let's say one student is absolutely brilliant at math, so they tutor their peer. In exchange, that peer, who is a history buff, tutors them in history. By focusing strictly on what they do best, both students get better grades. Smith realized that if you apply this exact kind of specialization to entire nations, you dramatically increase overall global productivity.
But wait, what if one student is actually better at both math and history? Well, in 1817, David Ricardo hits us with a total game changer, comparative advantage. He mathematically proved that even if one country is less efficient at making absolutely everything, they can still unlock massive mutual gains by specializing where they are the least inefficient. It's all about having the lowest relative opportunity cost. You literally don't have to be the best at something to profit from trading it.
When you break down the core drivers of these two concepts, you see how they transitioned global trade from a hostile competition over gold into a highly cooperative system. Ricardo's addition is especially magical because it ensures every single nation, no matter how developed they are, has a profitable seat at the global trading table.
Moving into the 20th century, we hit Part 3, resources, innovation, and scale.
As economies modernized, our puzzle got way more complex. This is where the Heckscher-Ohlin model, or factor endowment theory, comes into play, and it's highly logical. It basically says, identify what you have a lot of. A country with abundant, cheap labor is naturally going to specialize in and export labor-intensive goods, like textiles. On the flip side, a country with massive amounts of capital will export capital-intensive goods, like airplanes. You trade based on what your geography and demographics hand you.
But then, economists like Paul Krugman realized something was missing. Why do countries with the exact same resources trade very similar goods with each other? Krugman showed that because making 1,000,000 units of something is vastly cheaper per unit than making just one, economies of scale actually drive countries to specialize. They trade simply to access larger markets, which leads to imperfect competition.
A perfect real-world example of this is the heavy truck traffic that constantly crosses the Ambassador Bridge between the US and Canada. This is modern intra-industry trade in action, just like the 1964 North American Auto Pact, where similar countries traded massive amounts of specialized auto parts back and forth. They weren't trading because one had different natural resources, they were heavily integrating to drive down costs through massive economies of scale.
All right, let's look at Section 4, modern competitiveness.
By the 1990s, the whole conversation shifted. Michael Porter taught us that in the modern world, national advantage isn't just inherited from the ground. It has to be actively built. Think about Silicon Valley. That kind of competitiveness is created through constant innovation, world-class infrastructure, super demanding local consumers, and fierce domestic rivalry. Dense networks of specialized suppliers and knowledge sharing, that is what builds a global export powerhouse today.
Because of all this, previously isolated nations are now completely woven together into a deeply interdependent economic fabric. Sure, physical distance and borders absolutely still matter, but the sheer volume of trade as a share of world GDP has just skyrocketed. We rely heavily on each other for everything from basic raw materials to high-level intellectual property.
And finally, Section 5, Digital and Sustainable Trade.
Let's bring our lesson all the way to the present day. Physical goods packed into boxes on cargo ships, that's only part of the story now. Today, wealth is data, knowledge, and sustainable practices. Products are literally disassembled across incredibly complex global value chains. Plus, we're in the era of service outsourcing. An accountant can balance a company's books from halfway across the globe, and a radiologist can read x-rays instantly over the internet. And crucially, we're now actively wrestling with green trade policies, debating carbon tariffs, and pushing hard for sustainable development to stop the creation of pollution havens.
So as we wrap up this historical explainer, I want to leave you with a massive question to chew on. As pollution havens are forced to close, as green technologies reshape production, and as digital borders open wider than ever before, how are you going to participate in the next grand evolution of trade? The theories are going to keep adapting, and understanding them, well, that is your ultimate competitive advantage. Thanks for joining me today. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.